Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in the UAE on Thursday for the final leg of his Gulf trip after stops in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The visit has yielded hundreds of billions of dollars in agreements so far, including a $600 billion U.S.-Saudi economic pact and a $96 billion deal between Qatar Airways and Boeing. On Thursday, UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed doubled down on his pledge to invest $1.4 trillion in the U.S. In this episode, we hear from Al Monitor's senior market research analyst, Sam Wendel. Sam takes us through the most significant deals from the trip and what they say about U.S. Gulf relations and the region's efforts to reduce dependence on oil and gas. Hope you enjoy. Sam, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and for your reporting on this. First question is a basic one. What deals stood out to you most on Trump's trip to the Gulf?
Yeah, good question. And there's lots to unpack here. And we're still kind of waiting on details on a lot of these deals. But, big picture, to me, the U.S. Gulf chip deals linked to the visit are probably the most significant from my vantage point, as they could actually help the UAE and Saudi Arabia sort of cement their role in the global AI race. But you also saw a lot of, MOUs being signed with players like Google, Grok, Salesforce. And many of these companies, they're already, have been engaged with the kingdom in the past. So that's not necessarily anything too new. But you also saw chip players, for example, like NVIDIA and AMD, inking some kind of high profile deals. And, those hadn't been quite as prevalent before. So that kind of stood out. And then, of course, there's the Boeing deal, which was very significant.
I'm glad you brought up the Boeing deal because my question is, why was that deal between them and Qatar Airways? Why was that so important for Boeing?
Yeah, it's a big PR win for Boeing. They had been kind of struggling with some bad headlines, both globally and in the region, the past year plus, although their struggles have, predated that. But they're still struggling with some of these issues in terms of production problems, delayed deliveries, general mistrust. And so, it was good for them to, ink another sort of headline grabbing deal. And supposedly this is the largest in their history. But, it's going to take years for some of these planes to be delivered. And there are plenty of question marks around Boeing's future and whether this sort of Trump bump will last for it.
And what do the deals the U.S. made with Saudi Arabia indicate about the state of their economic diversification plans? Is oil still king, or are they really making progress on diversifying?
Well, they are making progress, but this, visit really showed how big tech and AI and American ties are in Saudi Arabia's plans. But at the end of the day, these sort of big, flashy MOUs and huge commitments like investment pledges, they've loomed large in Vision 2030 from the beginning. That's been part of the playbook. So thematically, this is kind of more of the same. And at the same time, this fanfare can't really mask the fact that, Saudi Arabia really wants foreign direct investment to help fuel Vision 2030. And they remain well below those targets. And if you look at this sort of flurry of deals made during Trump's visit, some of those in theory could be inward investment, but a lot of them also align with Trump's America First investment priorities, which doesn't necessarily help Saudi Arabia, especially at a moment when energy prices are a little bit lower than they would like to balance their budget. So, this creates complications for Saudi Arabia's economic diversification on some fronts. We'll have to kind of see how these deals actually play out.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Sam Wendel after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Sam, what UAE investments might we see after UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed doubled down on his 1.4 trillion investment commitment after meeting with Trump on Thursday?
Yeah, again, we're some of the details here are a little bit fuzzy. We don't have, full clarity on what this all entails, but of the sectors that have been mentioned, energy and manufacturing are areas that have been highlighted and are, areas to watch. But, on the tech front, that's where we're seeing a lot of the momentum. And I would imagine we're going to see more, data center related deals, AI chip factories, and more investments into US specific players. And that was evidenced during Sheikh Tahnoon's recent visit to Washington, where, a few days or the day he left, I think essentially the US greenlit an investment into a G42 backed company that had been delayed due to a national security review. And so, I mean, the stage has been set for more moves, but once again, we got to wait a little bit to see some details come into focus.
And would you say that, U.S. concerns about the UAE's ties with China as they relate to chips, would you say those have been alleviated on the U.S. side?
Not fully. I think it's going to be a point of contention going forward, and you'll probably see more reports coming out on that. But I think the dynamic has definitely shifted between the Biden compared, the Biden administration's approach is being kind of changed by the Trump administration. So I think you will see these chip deals move forward, but I don't think that the concerns are a thing of the past just yet.
And last question, briefly, how satisfied do you think both Trump was and the Gulf states themselves were with the trip and the outcomes we've seen so far?
I think all parties are going to claim big wins here, particularly Trump. This business trip, full of deal making is like kind of tailor-made for his leadership style, and I think he will use this trip to burnish his image with the U.S. public at this moment. But looking closely, it remains to be seen how many of these deals are going to, turn into reality. And there were also deals and agreements that didn't emerge that had been discussed. So I'm sure there will be criticism or there will be lingering questions. But in the short term, I think everyone's going to say this was a success. And at the same time, I mean, we're still looking at the UAE leg of the trip is still going on, and by the time we're done with this call, more details could come out on what's going on there. But, at the moment, it's been a little quiet on that compared to Trump's stopovers in Doha and Riyadh. So considering the interregional rivalries in the Gulf, it would be telling if Saudi Arabia and Qatar completely overshadowed the UAE in terms of big investment pledges.
Sam, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting on the trip and the related topics.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.